What if your depression wasn't actually bad? What if your depression is actually a gift? What I'm about to share with you has been my personal approach to how I've been able to transform my depression into inspiration and being able to accept whenever depression arises in my life and being able to sit in it as well as know how to move out of it when I don't want to sit into it. We're specifically going to be approaching this topic through the lens of human design. This is a system that allows you to see how your unique energy works. A lot of people describe it as your map for moving through life without resistance. It is very powerful. If you're brand new to human design, no problem. You do not need to understand anything except what I'm about to walk you through. First and foremost, go to mybodygraph.com to pull up your chart. It's based on when you're born. And if that freaks you out, feel free to abandon this video or go along and experiment with it. Worst case, you learn something to click out of your depression. When you look at your chart, you're going to have no idea what any of it means. Don't worry about that. Look at the image that is on the right-hand side of the screen and compare it to your chart. I want you to see if you have any of the channels that are within the individual circuit, which is what you are looking at the right side of the screen. If you do not have any channels, then go ahead and look at the gates that you have within the individual circuit. The gates are the half lines. I realize none of this makes sense as of right now, but we're about to move into it and it will start to click. So stick with me. According to the founder of human design, he says that all depression in the world comes from the individual circuit. The individual circuit is one of 3 circuits within the chart. Now, the way that I like to approach the circuitries is to think about each one as having major characteristics across all of the gates and channels that fall within it. So the individual circuitry is going to have a certain theme that is going to be different than the collective as well as the tribal. So for the sake of this video, because all depression comes from the individual circuitry, let's hone in on that one. As the name implies, the individual circuit is all about the individual experience that we are having amongst ourselves, separate from one another. It's very internal. The theme for all of the gates and channels within the individual circuit is all about mutation. There is this obsession with change and wanting to mutate society forward. We see things before other people see them and are usually the trendsetters. Depending on your timing, you might be seen as a genius or a freak. Quick analogy for describing the genius to freak depending on timing. Think about someone that is buying a house in the up-and-coming part of town 10 to 15 years before everyone else does. The everyone else is what we refer to as the collective in human design. We'll get to that later in this video. A lot of people, they're going to be looking at that person and saying, "You're crazy, don't do that, don't move your family there, that could be dangerous. You're a freak for doing that." Now, 10 years later, when they're selling their house for over $1 million, over what they initially bought it for, other people are looking at them and saying, "Wow, you're a genius." The perception of being a genius or a freak depends on timing, but the individual has this inner knowing that they will follow and go carve their own path despite what other people think about them. Another core element to individuality is that any channel or gate within the individual circuit operates within a pulse. I like to think about it as a creative pulse or a genius flow that is going through your body. At times you're connected to it and at other times you're not. The depression often occurs when you are not connected to it. It can feel like, when am I ever gonna be creative again? Am I ever gonna feel purpose again? Oh, will I ever feel the spirit of God again? And you're in this depressed state, just being very aware in the present moment that you are lacking of something and you're looking for change to occur. So now that you understand the basics of the individual circuitry, let's talk about why depression isn't actually a bad thing. One of the stories that I have used to better understand this information comes from the Plato era. During the Plato era, they would look at bipolar disorder, this experience of having sudden highs and sudden lows, as someone that was gifted with the connection to God. They would say that when that person was having the high frequency experience of this emotion, they would say that God is with them today. And when they had the low frequency, they would say God is allowing him to rest today. I think this is such a beautiful way to look at depression. Depression is just an opportunity to rest. We can try to force things to happen whenever we are in that low frequency, when in reality, we are just meant to rest and wait until that pulse, that creative pulse that comes with the individual circuit, will turn on again, because rest assured it will. Hey, quick note, at the end of this video, I'm going to tell you how to look at your unique gift that you have access to and how you specifically are experiencing depression. You're going to know what it looks like when you are at your low point and what that high point looks like when the gods are with you. What does God being with you look like? Stick around and find out. Now, sitting with your depression is not exactly fun, so how do you click out of it when you don't want to be sitting in it? Another analogy for describing the individual circuit is a caveman sitting out of his cave, bored out of his mind because nothing is happening. He's sick of being cold, he's sick of living in caves, he's rubbing two rocks together, and boom, there's a spark. The individual lives for that spark. But the collective is going to take that spark and they are going to turn it into a fire. They're going to tend the fire. They're going to chop wood for the fire. They're going to come up with all of these different ways to make the fire bigger. They're going to learn from experiences that the fire can't be that big. Long story short, the collective is never bored. They take the aha moment or the inspiration that is created by the individual and they integrate that to make it better and better and better. So the lesson here is that when you are in the depressed state, I want you to turn around and look at the collective gates and channels that you have within your chart and embody those energies instead. This has been huge for me in my life, hence why I'm sharing this video. The reason that this works so well is because the collective is all about sharing experiences and conversation around logical arguments. And so if you are in this depressed state and you're in a place where you're feeling very alone, come back to that person that bought a house in the gentrified part of town. They're feeling very alone because they're not close to community. They're far from anything that is happening in town. That person feels lonely. And so in order to click out of that depression, they need to go back to the collective of the shared experiences and conversations. So the gates and channels that you have within your chart that are collective are going to help you click out of that depression of the individual loneliness and being obsessed with change and mutation into the integration of what has already come that is all about sharing experiences. On the right-hand side of the screen, you are going to see all of the collective gates, and you can compare this to your chart to see which gates within your chart are collective. Now, I highly suggest looking at the placement of these gates within your chart. You don't need to understand it, but the ones that are higher up in the chart are going to be ones that you will have an easier time grasping, especially if one falls underneath your sun or earth sign. Pay special attention to those. Okay, final part. Now to talk about how to look at the specifics of where your depression comes from, as well as the gift attached to it. There are two resources that I want to walk you through. The first is to go to humandesign.tools and read about the channels that you have within the individual circuit. You can also read about the individual gates within those channels, but those don't typically have as much information on them. The second way that you can dive into this information is by looking at the system called Gene Keys, which is a cousin to Human Design. You can get this book on Amazon. I will link to it in the description below, and it breaks down all of the 64 gene keys or 64 gates that we refer to in Human Design. For each key, it is going to walk through the low frequency of that energy or strength, as well as the high frequency of it, and how to transition between the two through what we call the gift. Focusing on this gift is going to give you a practical way to apply this into your life. So you can look at this for the individual circuitries as well as the collective circuitries to better understand how this depression moves through you and how to click out of it. Once again, this is my personal experience of how I've used this information in my life, and I would love to hear your reflections, especially those of you that are other human design nerds. Go ahead and drop your comments below. Or let me know what ahas this has created in your life. After all, I am 100% individual and therefore all about mutation and change. And if you want to keep binge watching videos or maybe start from the beginning of what is human design, I will link to that video here on the screen, as well as another one that will help you feed this desire to learn more about this system, which is oh so cool. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.